I'm Ashley Jennings, 34, and I built my life one quiet step at a time, working full-time through school, saving every cent, and finally landing a job that gave me real stability. For years, I supported my younger sister through every crisis: tuition, rent, even co-signing the mortgage when no one else would. But when she used my credit card to pay for her 35K honeymoon without asking, then laughed it off like it was no big deal, I made a decision that changed everything. Have you ever felt betrayed by someone who counted on your help, only to act like you owed it to them? If you have, share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I take you through what really happened, drop where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to draw a hard line with someone close to you, hit that like button and subscribe. These are the stories that remind us how powerful boundaries really are. What came next? Even I didn't see it coming. When our parents died, everything shifted fast. I was 23, out of school, working my first salaried job, just starting to feel like I had a grip on adulthood. My sister, Paige, was 19 and halfway through college with a part-time job at a coffee shop and no real direction. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, still numb from the funeral, and hearing them say we'd inherited nothing but debt. I looked over at her, and she just looked lost. That's when I made a decision. I didn't say it out loud, but in my head, I knew I'd handle it. I'd take care of her. That became the pattern. I picked up extra freelance work to cover the loan balances in our parents' names. I moved Paige into my apartment for a year, even though it meant giving up my second bedroom/office and working from the kitchen table. I bought her textbooks when her financial aid ran dry and drove her to job interviews when her car broke down. There wasn't a big dramatic sacrifice, just 100 small ones, all of them adding up over time. When she finally graduated, we went out for dinner. Nothing fancy, just a neighborhood Italian place. She ordered wine, which she couldn't afford, and made a toast. To my sister, she said, who somehow turned into both my mom and my dad, but cooler. I laughed, even though it made my stomach twist a little. I didn't want to be either of those things. I just wanted her to be okay. She got a marketing job after that. Not her dream, but steady. She moved into a tiny apartment with a roommate and called me almost every night that first month. Sometimes it was just to vent about work. Sometimes it was to ask how to do things, how to write a formal email, how taxes worked, how to break a lease. I was fine being the person she leaned on. I'd been doing it for years. Things shifted a bit when she started dating Nick. He was polite, confident, a little too into crypto for my taste, but he made her laugh, and she seemed steadier with him. I tried to be supportive. I offered to help her with her resume when she wanted a raise. I coached her through negotiating her salary. I even lent them money for a new washer-dryer when the old one broke, because they couldn't get financing on their own. No interest, no formal agreement, just a text. Thanks, you're the best. That was the pattern too. I gave, she took, and every now and then there'd be a quick thank you. But there was a shift around the time they got engaged. It started small. She stopped looping me in on plans. I found out about her engagement through an Instagram post. A photo of them on a rooftop, him on one knee, her crying, captioned, "He finally did it." I texted her congratulations. She sent back a string of emojis and said, "Sorry, it was chaotic. I meant to call you." I should have said something then, but I didn't. I told myself she was just excited, distracted, overwhelmed. So I leaned in, like always. I offered to host the bridal shower, helped her research venues, and made a wedding planning spreadsheet when she got overwhelmed. I booked the florist when she forgot and couldn't get her deposit back. I paid for her dress alterations when she maxed out her card. She joked that I was her wedding fairy godmother, and I smiled through it. At one point, she asked me if I could co-sign a short-term loan to cover the remaining catering costs. I hesitated, and she gave me this look, half disbelief, half hurt. "You know I'll pay it back," she said. "You've never had a problem helping me before." So I did it. Again. The week before the wedding, she was stressed. Her voice was sharp on the phone. "Can you just handle it?" she snapped when I asked about the guest list changes. I chalked it up to nerves. But I noticed something else too, how easily she passed responsibility off to me. How little she acknowledged what I was juggling to keep things moving. At the wedding, she barely looked at me. I gave a toast, short, simple, heartfelt. She didn't mention it afterward. A few guests told me it made them tear up. But Paige didn't say a word. I assumed she was too busy, too in the moment. I went home that night feeling, not upset exactly, just empty. Like I'd spent months pouring everything into something and didn't even get a nod in return. Still, when she and Nick left for their honeymoon, I sent her a goodie bag for the flight, noise-canceling earbuds, a neck pillow, her favorite snacks. She posted a story saying, "Look what my amazing sister got me," with a heart emoji. That tiny moment of recognition made me feel like maybe I was just being sensitive. Maybe it wasn't as unbalanced as it felt. Then, 5 days later, I got an alert from my credit card. A charge for 1,720, then 3,100, then another one for 8,000. The charges kept coming. Resort names, flight upgrades, luxury dining. I stared at the total. Over 35,000 and climbing. My first thought wasn't anger. It was confusion. Maybe it was fraud. Maybe my card had been cloned. I called the bank. They confirmed the transactions. They were coming from the exact region Paige was vacationing in. I called her. She picked up on the second ring, sounding bubbly. "Hey, can I call you back? We're about to head to dinner." I asked her directly. "Did you use my card?" She paused, just for a second. Then she said, "Oh yeah, don't worry, we'll pay you back. It was just easier to use yours. You get better points, right?" I didn't say anything. She kept talking. "Family helps family. You always say that." I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just said, "We'll talk when you're back," and hung up. That night, I opened my laptop and started looking through old emails. I wanted to see what else had my name on it. I had a feeling I wouldn't like what I found. The first time I noticed something was off, it was small. I texted Paige asking for the final headcount for the bridal shower. No answer. A day passed, then two. I sent a follow-up. She finally replied, "Ugh, sorry. Things are crazy. Can you just assume like 30? That was the tone she'd started using more often. Casual, clipped, like I was a personal assistant, instead of someone volunteering their weekends and evenings to help her. I told myself she was just stressed. I remembered how much pressure I'd felt planning my own events. But it wasn't just stress. It was something colder. She began missing calls. When I did get her on the phone, she'd say things like, "I'm drowning right now," or "Can you just take care of it?" When I tried to clarify something about the budget, she brushed it off. "You're the rich one, remember?" I'm not rich. I make a stable income. I have savings because I don't live beyond my means. But to her, anyone who wasn't living paycheck to paycheck might as well be a millionaire. She'd always had this idea that I was the money sister. Even when we were kids, if I saved up birthday money and bought something nice, she'd ask to borrow it or complain that I was showing off. That dynamic never really changed. It just got more subtle. During one of our last planning calls, she told me she'd been reading about financial energy. I asked what that meant, and she said, "It's like, if you believe you deserve abundance, you attract it. The universe gives you what you expect." I said something like, "Sure, but it helps to pay your bills, too." She laughed. That's such a scarcity mindset. The whole conversation made my skin crawl. She started posting more online, too. Selfies in white dresses, with captions like, "Ready to receive the soft life I've earned." Reels of her wedding vision board. All luxury brands and 5-star venues. One video had her saying, "If you want the fairy tale, you've gotta manifest it." It had over 10,000 views. What stood out wasn't just the content. It was that she stopped tagging me in anything. I was the one running half the errands and footing the bill for most of the extras, but she never mentioned that publicly. I asked her once, lightly, if she could give me a heads up before announcing venue changes on social media. She said, "I just go with what feels right." You overthink everything. Nick wasn't any better. If anything, he made it worse. He'd taken to referring to me as the bank. Once, when I was over helping them organize their registry, he asked if I could throw in a little extra for their honeymoon. It wasn't a joke. I laughed it off, but he didn't smile. I was at their apartment one night, trying to finalize logistics for the rehearsal dinner, and he walked past me and said, "You're not gonna be one of those bitter older sisters, right? Like, let her have her big moment." It took everything in me not to respond. I wasn't bitter. I was tired, and I was starting to feel used. Paige brushed it off. "Don't mind him," she said. "He's just stressed about the honeymoon." Flights went up again. I almost offered to help right then. I caught myself. I thought maybe that meant I was learning, but I was wrong. The week of the wedding, I sent a simple email with a list of what I was covering: florist, alterations, shower venue, some decor. I didn't ask for reimbursement. I just wanted it acknowledged. She replied 2 days later, "You're amazing. Seriously, I couldn't do this without you." It should have felt good. It didn't. It felt like a form letter. Then came the honeymoon. They left the morning after the wedding. I dropped off a little care package at their building. Just snacks for the plane, travel-sized toiletries. Nothing big, no note. I figured she'd know it was from me. 2 days later, I got a text. Just a photo of her and Nick in a hot tub, champagne in hand, with the caption, "You really outdid yourself. Thank you for the best surprise ever." No explanation. I responded, "Surprise?" She texted back, "The resort. You really didn't have to. We're so spoiled." I stared at my screen. My stomach turned. I opened my credit card app. I'd been getting notifications all week, but I hadn't paid attention. I figured it was my monthly auto payments. Then I saw it. A charge for 1, $720 to a travel agency. Then 3, $100 for a hotel in Santorini. Another 8, $500 for a package that included luxury upgrades and private excursions. In total, $35,117.74. I double-checked the card. It was mine. The same one she'd used in the past when her debit card got compromised. The one she still had saved to her Apple Pay. I called the bank immediately. They confirmed the charges. Same location as her honeymoon. Same card, no error. I sat there on my couch for a long time. I didn't feel rage. Not right away. Just something heavier, like betrayal, but deeper. Like I'd been stupid without realizing it. When I called her, she answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said. "Can I call you back? We're about to head to dinner." I didn't say hello. I just asked, "Did you use my credit card?" There was a pause. Just a beat too long. Then she said, "Oh yeah, don't worry. We'll pay you back. It was just easier to use yours. You get better points, right?" I didn't say anything. She kept talking. "Family helps family. You always say that." That's when it hit me. That wasn't a slip. That was her justification. She thought this was fine. That I'd be annoyed maybe, but I'd get over it. Like always. I told her we'd talk when she got back. She laughed. "Okay, Miss Serious. Love you." She hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and started pulling every shared document, every legal agreement, every loan, every lease, anything with both our names on it. I wasn't angry yet, but something had shifted. It was like a door had quietly closed in my mind. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to make sure I never ended up in this position again. And if she didn't like how that looked, well, that wasn't my problem anymore. She got back from the honeymoon the following Sunday. I didn't reach out. I watched her stories like everyone else did. Poolside cocktails, rose petal turndowns, boat selfies, champagne. There was a picture of them holding hands under a canopy with the caption, "Couldn't have done it without our amazing village." I wasn't tagged. I didn't expect to be, but seeing it still stung. Monday came and went. No message. Tuesday, Nothing. By Wednesday, I sent a simple text. Can you call me when you have a second? She responded with a thumbs up emoji. That night she finally called. Sounded cheerful. Hey, sorry. First day back was insane. What's up? I didn't waste time. Paige, did you use my credit card for the honeymoon? She didn't hesitate. Yeah, we did. I meant to tell you, but things got so crazy with the wedding and the travel and… Without asking? Well, it's not like I just stole it. You've let me use it before, and you always say it's no big deal. I never said it was okay to charge $35,000 without telling me. It's not like it's gone. We'll pay you back. When? I don't know. Soon. Nick has a bonus coming in a few months, and I'm due for a raise. You don't have to make this a whole thing. I'm not making it a thing. I'm setting a boundary. Oh my God, a boundary? Seriously? You're acting like I drained your savings. You didn't drain my savings. You violated my trust. There was a pause. Then she laughed. Quiet, condescending. Family helps family. You always say that. Not like this. Okay, well, maybe if you weren't so uptight about money. This is the last time, Paige. I'm not doing this again. She went silent. For a second, I thought she hung up. Then she said, Stop being dramatic. That was it. I didn't respond. I ended the call. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after that. Not angry. Not even shocked anymore. Just clear. 3 weeks went by. She didn't reach out. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement. I didn't chase her. I focused on work, cleaned up my finances, paid off the card myself to avoid the interest. Then I did what I should have done a long time ago. I started removing her access to everything. The shared Netflix account? Gone. The backup emergency contact for her job? Removed. I pulled up the documents from when she and Nick bought their condo. I'd co-signed the mortgage 3 years earlier, back when her credit was shaky and the bank wouldn't approve them on their own. They promised it would just be temporary, then never brought it up again. I emailed the lender, asked for a copy of the most recent statements. They were behind on 2 payments. Technically, I was a legal owner. Not a full one, but enough that my credit would take a hit if they defaulted. I called the loan servicer, asked what my options were. They said if I wanted off the loan and they weren't paying, I could either negotiate with them directly or initiate a process to force sale or foreclosure. It felt extreme, harsh, but it also felt like the first time in years I was holding a card she couldn't laugh off. I didn't make a decision that day. I just sat with it. Meanwhile, she kept posting. Brunch photos, gym selfies, a caption about how life feels like it's finally coming together. It was like nothing had happened. Like 35 grand just disappeared into the wind and she was waiting for me to forget about it, like I always did. A mutual friend texted me around that time, said she'd run into Paige at a dinner party and asked how married life was going. Paige told her, honestly, if I'd known being married meant getting upgraded to Sister's Black Card, I would have done it sooner. I stared at that message for a long time. That night, I made my decision. I didn't send a warning. I didn't call. I didn't write a dramatic email or demand a check. I filled out the paperwork, signed it electronically, and scheduled a follow-up with the bank. Let the system do what it's built to do. Let her deal with the consequences the way any other adult would. 3 days later, I got a notice that the process had begun. That same night, I saw she'd posted a photo from their condo balcony with a caption about how home is where the heart is. I didn't click on it. I logged out and went to bed. The next morning, I started deleting old shared folders, travel itineraries, loan documents, receipts, things I used to hold on to, just in case. I realized I didn't need them anymore. The part of me that kept trying to be useful, helpful, indispensable, it wasn't serving anyone, least of all me. That weekend, my cousin called to ask if everything was okay between me and Paige. Apparently, Paige had been vague posting. Something about betrayal. Something about people showing their true colors. I told her I was fine, which was mostly true. But I also knew something was coming, and that when it did, she wouldn't be able to act surprised. Because deep down, she knew exactly what she'd done. She just didn't think I'd ever make her answer for it. And to be fair, until now, she'd been right. I didn't say anything about it for a few days. Just let the paperwork move through the system. The bank had a timeline. So did the courts. I kept the emails organized in a folder on my desktop and went about my week like nothing had changed. A few days later, I had dinner with a friend I hadn't seen in a while, Maya. We met at a Thai place halfway between our apartments. She asked how the wedding had been, and I just shook my head. It's a long story. She waited. I gave her the short version. I told her about the honeymoon charges, the way Paige responded when I confronted her, how she still hadn't paid a cent back. I told her about the condo, the mortgage, the missed payments, and how I'd started the process to remove myself from it. Maya didn't interrupt, just listened. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and asked, "Why does she still have access to your accounts?" I didn't have an answer. Not a real one. "She's my sister," used to feel like a reason. Now it felt like an excuse. We split the bill. On the walk back to my car, I kept thinking about that question. It wasn't just the card. It was everything. My name was still listed as an emergency contact at her old job. She still used my address for some of her old medical mail. She had access to a shared Dropbox I'd created for family documents, birth certificates, insurance info, tax paperwork. I'd let all of that stay open because it felt easier than having a conversation. But easier wasn't safer. And easier wasn't working anymore. That weekend, I sat down and made a list. Everything she still had access to. Everything that needed to change. It was longer than I expected. I started small. Password changes. Two-factor authentication. I closed an old Venmo account we used to use for splitting family expenses. Then I revoked access to the Dropbox. I unsubscribed from the backup email she still had tied to my old phone plan. None of it was dramatic. No announcements. No confrontation. Just a quiet unraveling of something I should have undone years ago. I didn't feel vindictive. If anything, I felt embarrassed. Embarrassed that I'd let it go on this long. That I'd been so willing to play the role she'd cast me in. The reliable one, the helper, the one who always said yes, and every time she took something more, she'd act like I'd handed it to her. The more I looked back, the more I saw it. That time, she borrowed my car for a week while hers was in the shop, then got a parking ticket and never told me. I only found out when I got the notice in the mail. Or when she moved out of her old apartment and left me to deal with the utility bills still in my name, she called it an oversight. Or the time she asked me to help her with a job reference, and I wrote it from scratch, edited her resume, prepped her for the interview, then found out later she told her new coworkers she'd done it all herself. Each time, she made it seem like I was doing what sisters did. Each time, I told myself it wasn't a big deal. But it added up. And I was starting to realize the only reason it kept happening was because I kept making it possible. A few days later, I got a text from Nick. Short. No greeting. "Hey, did you file something with the mortgage company? We got a weird letter." I didn't respond. The next day, I got a voicemail from Paige. Her voice was tight. She didn't sound angry yet, just confused. "Hey, something's going on with the house. We got this notice. I don't really understand it, but can you call me back when you get a second?" I didn't. I forwarded her the customer service number from the mortgage servicer and said, "They can explain." No response. I half expected an explosion, a long message, an accusation, but nothing came. I think, deep down, she was trying to figure out how serious I was. If this was just a warning or something she could still talk me out of. She didn't know yet that I wasn't bluffing. That I'd already signed the forms, submitted the documents, verified the debt. I wasn't walking this back. That weekend, I got an email confirmation. The foreclosure proceedings were officially initiated. There was still time for them to fix it, refinance, take full ownership, but the clock was ticking. I didn't celebrate. There was no rush of satisfaction, no relief, just a kind of stillness. I started thinking about everything I'd tolerated over the years. Every time I cleaned up a mess, every time I loaned money I didn't really have, every time I let a slight slide because she was going through something, and how she never once stopped to ask what I was going through. It wasn't about revenge. It was about no longer making myself small to keep the peace, no longer paying for harmony that only benefited her. I went through my closet that night and started bagging up old things for donation. Not because I was purging some symbolic memory, just because I'd put it off for too long. There was a dress in there I'd worn to her graduation. I almost kept it. Then I didn't. By Monday, I'd cleaned out the last of the joint folders and changed every lingering shared login. I booked a therapy session, something I'd told myself for years I didn't have time for. I did. A few days later, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in a while. Paige. I let it ring. She didn't leave a voicemail. Then a text came in. Can we talk? I just want to understand. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone down and went back to what I was doing. She didn't need me to explain. She already understood. She just didn't like what the answer said. The decision didn't happen all at once. It built quietly over days. I kept waiting for something to change, for her to call and say she understood, or to admit she crossed a line, or to offer something that sounded even remotely like an apology. But nothing came. The longer I waited, the clearer it became. She wasn't going to take responsibility because she didn't see what she did as wrong. Not really. So I stopped waiting. I started with the card, called the bank, explained the situation, flagged the honeymoon charges. They asked a few questions, transferred me twice. I confirmed that she'd had access to the card but had never been authorized to use it in this way. That was enough. The card was frozen within the hour. The next step wasn't as clean. I pulled out the mortgage paperwork from 5 years earlier. I'd saved the PDF in a folder I hadn't touched since they closed on the place. At the time, she and Nick didn't qualify on their own. His credit was shaky, and she was barely 2 years into a job that still hadn't gone permanent. They'd come to me together, sat on my couch, made their pitch. We just need a little help to get approved, she said. You won't have to do anything after that. It's just a signature. I believed her. I remembered asking more than once if they'd refinance once they were on their feet. Of course, she said. As soon as we can. They never did. When I opened the statements, it was all there. Missed payments, late fees, collection notices. 2 months past due, with a third coming up fast. My name was still listed. My credit was at risk. My liability was real. I stared at the document for a long time. Then I opened a new tab and called the lender. It was a short conversation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to justify anything. I just explained who I was, what I had signed, and why I wanted out. They walked me through the process. It wasn't fast, but it was possible. There were 2 options: negotiate a release with the primary borrowers, or initiate a legal process to sever my liability. I knew how that conversation would go if I tried. They'd promise to fix it. They'd say it was temporary. They'd guilt me into waiting. Again. And then nothing would happen. Again. So I chose the second option. The paperwork took a few days. I had to submit documentation, verify my identity, write a formal statement. I did it all in one evening, double-checked the forms, and sent everything off before I could second-guess myself. The confirmation came 2 days later. The process had begun. I didn't tell her. I didn't warn her. I didn't think she deserved that kind of courtesy anymore. A few hours later, I got an email from Nick. The subject line was, "Are you serious?" The message wasn't long. This is how you want to handle things? Passive-aggressive and cowardly? You could have talked to us like adults. Now you've made a mess that's going to screw all of us, including you. I hope you know that. No greeting, no signature. I didn't reply. I saved the email to the same folder where I kept the bank correspondence. Then I blocked his address. That was the only reaction I got for a while. No calls, no messages, no dramatic outbursts. Just silence. I think they were hoping it would blow over. That I'd come to my senses. That I'd undo it like I always had. But I wasn't undoing anything this time. I knew what the next few weeks would look like. They'd get official notices, letters from the lender, warnings about non-payment, eventually, a formal statement about the foreclosure process. I wasn't trying to take their home away. That wasn't the point. But they were the ones who stopped paying. I just stopped covering for them. At work, I kept my head down. No one knew what was going on. I didn't bring it up. I poured energy into projects, stayed late a few nights. It felt good to focus on something that had structure, rules, consequences that made sense. A few friends reached out, people who'd seen Paige's posts and were starting to piece things together. She was still vague posting. Hard to believe someone so close could turn on you, one read. Another, family should be the safest place, not the most dangerous. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. Let her tell whatever version made her feel better. I knew the truth. A week later, I got another message. This one from her. It was long, rambling. She said she felt blindsided, that I'd always been the one she could count on, and now she didn't recognize me anymore. She said the money wasn't a big deal, you have more than enough, and that the house situation was an overreaction. She didn't ask me to stop. She just said, I miss my sister. I want her back. I read it twice. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say that I hadn't already made clear. She didn't miss me. She missed the version of me who never said no. The version who quietly fixed everything, paid for everything, made her life easier. That version was gone. Later that week, I got a letter from the bank confirming the foreclosure timeline. They'd given Paige and Nick 30 days to respond, pay the balance, or come up with a solution. If they didn't, the proceedings would move forward. I printed the letter and filed it away. That weekend, I went grocery shopping, cleaned my apartment, took a walk in the park near my building. It felt like any other day. But under the surface, something had shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on anyone. Not for thanks, not for permission, not for peace. I'd already given myself all three. 3 weeks went by. I didn't hear from her. The bank sent a notice confirming what I already knew, that she and Nick hadn't responded, hadn't paid, hadn't made arrangements. Their grace period was up. The paperwork was moving forward. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was how quiet it all was. I'd expected some kind of fight, a confrontation, but nothing came. No texts, no calls, just radio silence. Like if she didn't acknowledge it, it wouldn't be real. Then, on a Thursday morning, my phone rang. Her name lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave one. 2 hours later, she called again. This time, I picked up. The first thing I heard was crying. Not sniffling, sobbing. Full body, panicked crying. She could barely get the words out. They taped something to the door. I didn't know, I didn't think. How could you let this happen? I didn't say anything right away. She kept going. You didn't even warn me. You just, decided to ruin my life? I said calmly. I didn't ruin your life. I stepped away from it. She went quiet. For a second, I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, You're punishing me. I said, I'm protecting myself. You knew we were behind. You knew we were figuring things out. No, Paige. I knew you were pretending everything was fine and hoping I'd step in like I always do. She didn't deny it. You used my credit card, I said. You didn't ask. You didn't tell me. You just decided. And you never paid a dime back. I told you we would. You said you would, but you didn't. And that's the difference. Her voice shifted then, from panic to anger. I can't believe you'd let it go this far. I didn't respond. You really think this is gonna fix anything? You think this makes you the good guy? I'm not trying to be the good guy, I said. I'm trying to stop being the one who always gets hurt. That was the end of it. She said, "You're unbelievable," and hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a while after that, staring at the counter, at the glass of water. I hadn't finished. I felt tired, not heavy, just done. That night, I muted her on every platform. I didn't block her. I just didn't want her in my face every time I opened my phone. But a few days later, a mutual friend sent me something. A screenshot. Paige had posted a photo. It was their driveway, empty. No car, no people, just concrete and shadow. No caption. No filters either. She always used filters. There were no comments. At least, none that I could see. Just a string of likes and one saved icon. I stared at it for a while. I thought I'd feel something. Regret. Relief. Satisfaction. But I didn't. It wasn't that I was numb. It's just that I'd already felt everything there was to feel. The betrayal, the disappointment, the sadness. I'd run out of new ways to react to old patterns. That weekend, I visited my aunt. She'd texted me a few days earlier, asking if we could catch up. She didn't mention Paige, which I appreciated. We sat on her porch, drank iced tea, talked about normal things, weather, work, grocery prices. Then she said, gently, "I saw something on Facebook about the house." I nodded. She didn't say your name, but it's not hard to read between the lines. I didn't respond. She paused, then added, "I'm not judging. I just want to make sure you're okay." I told her I was. Which was true, mostly. I'd started sleeping better. My chest didn't feel tight all the time. I wasn't double-checking my accounts every morning out of habit. I was still angry sometimes, but it passed faster now, didn't sit in my body the same way. There was something freeing about knowing I'd finally made a decision for myself. Not for peace, not for her comfort, just for me. I left my aunt's place around sunset. Drove home with the windows down. It was quiet out, light traffic, music low. At a red light, I caught myself thinking about something Paige had said once, years ago, before any of this. We were driving to our parents' old place to clean it out. She was in the passenger seat, legs curled up, flipping through music on my phone. She said, "You always act like you've got it all together, but one day you're gonna snap, and it's gonna be wild." I remember laughing at the time. I said, "You think I'm repressing rage?" She grinned. "No, I think you're repressing boundaries." I don't think she meant it as a compliment. But now, years later, it was the truest thing she'd ever said. I hadn't snapped. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't burned anything down. I just stopped saying yes. And for her, that was worse. Because she didn't know how to exist without someone to clean up after her. I got home, changed into pajamas, made a cup of tea, sat on the couch with a book I'd been meaning to finish. At one point, my phone buzzed. A notification from her story. I ignored it. I didn't want to know what she was saying. The version of me she'd created in her head, the villain, the betrayer, the bad sister, I couldn't fix that. And I wasn't going to try. She'd made her choices. And I'd finally made mine. It had been a month since the call. The one where she said I ruined her life. Since then, silence. No follow-up, no apology, no last-minute plea. Just the quiet that settles after everything's already been said or shouted. I figured that was it. We were done. Then she messaged me. It came on a Thursday afternoon, in the middle of a meeting. Just a text. No emojis, no greeting. I didn't know you'd actually do it. I stared at it for a while before locking my screen. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't trust what was waiting behind that message. Was it regret? Anger? A trapdoor into another round of emotional gymnastics? By that point, I had learned that not every message deserved a response. A week passed. Then she tried again. This time it said, "I know I messed up. I want to talk, if you're willing." I didn't answer right away. I sat with it over the weekend. Thought about what I wanted, not what I owed. And when I did write back, I kept it simple. If we talk, it'll be in public. No pressure. But that's the only way I'll consider it. She said okay. We met at a coffee shop near my office. A small place. Neutral. It wasn't crowded, but there were enough people around to keep it grounded. No yelling, no theatrics. She was already there when I walked in, sitting near the window, nursing a tea she hadn't touched. She looked tired. Not dramatic, not staged. Just tired in the way someone looks when things haven't been going their way for a while. She stood up when she saw me. Tried to smile. I didn't. I sat down. Waited. She didn't rush into it. For once, she didn't launch into excuses or jokes. Just sat there, hands in her lap, looking down at her cup. Then she said, "I'm sorry." I didn't say anything. "I'm not just saying that because I want something," she went on. "I don't. I realized I've been doing this for years, taking, expecting, and when you finally stopped letting me, I acted like you betrayed me." Still, I waited. "I used you," she said. "Not maliciously, but carelessly. And I told myself that because we're family, it was fine, that you'd always be there, even when I was disrespectful. Even when I stopped saying thank you. I thought that made me resourceful, but it just made me lazy." I looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't performing. There wasn't a big emotional pitch, no expectation that this would end in a hug or a clean slate. It sounded like something she had rehearsed, not because it was fake, but because it had taken her time to get the words right. After a moment, I said, "I appreciate you saying that." She nodded. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I know I burned a bridge." "No," I said. "You didn't burn it, but you walked off it so many times it stopped feeling safe." She looked down again. "I don't hate you," I added. "I'm not angry anymore. But I also don't know how to trust you. Not yet." She didn't argue. "Trust isn't something you reset," I said. "It's something you rebuild. Slowly. Over time." "I know. I'm not closing the door, but I'm not leaving it wide open either." That was as much as I could offer. She nodded. "That's fair." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Just two people with a lot of history, and not much certainty about what came next. Eventually she stood. "Thanks for coming," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." I wasn't sure either. She left first. I stayed behind. Finished my tea. Watched the light shift in the windows. It didn't feel like a reunion. It felt like a ceasefire. But maybe that was something. Later that week, she sent another message. Just a link. An article about co-signed mortgages and how to formally remove a name once the loan is refinanced. No caption, no follow-up. I clicked it. Read it. Close the tab. It didn't mean she'd do anything, but it meant she was thinking about it. Which, for her, was something. A few days later, I got a letter from the bank. They were officially processing a transfer. Paige and Nick had submitted a new application. They were trying to qualify on their own this time. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was the first step toward finally getting my name off the loan. I didn't tell her thank you, not because I wasn't grateful, but because this wasn't about courtesy anymore. It was about accountability. She knew that now. We didn't become close again overnight. There weren't long calls or family brunches, just a few messages here and there. A question about a recipe, a photo of our parents' old dog, now gray around the muzzle. It felt distant, but also calm, like two people starting from scratch. I didn't know what our relationship would look like in the long term, Maybe it would rebuild. Maybe it would just plateau in a quiet kind of peace. But for the first time, the terms weren't hers. They were mine. And that made all the difference. It's been 8 months. We haven't spoken in over 4. Not since the day I got the final notice from the bank confirming my name was officially removed from the mortgage. No more liability, no more risk, just a line across the bottom of a document and a quiet end to years of being tangled up in someone else's mess. She and Nick moved out a few weeks after that. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from a friend of a friend, someone who still followed her on social media. They'd packed up the condo and gone to live with his parents in a suburb about 40 minutes outside the city. Not ideal, but it was what they could afford. That's how it was phrased. What they could afford. It wasn't said with judgment, just fact. Sometimes people still ask about her. Co-workers who knew I had a sister, acquaintances from family events. They're not prying, just curious. I usually say, "We're not close," and leave it at that. No bitterness, no backstory, just a boundary. She hasn't tried to reach out again, and I haven't either. Not because I'm angry, because I'm not. I'm tired of playing the one who reaches across the gap. I've done that for a long time. She knows how to find me. If she ever wants to talk like an adult, I'll consider it. But that's not where I'm placing my energy anymore. I've been focused on other things. I finally took a vacation. My first real one in years. No multitasking, no checking emails from a beach chair, just time. I flew to Portugal by myself, rented a quiet flat near the coast, slept in, walked everywhere, ate whatever I felt like, read entire books without looking at my phone once. On the third morning, I took my coffee down to a little rocky overlook near the water. I sat there with my feet dangling above the waves, salt air clinging to my clothes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt and still. Not victorious, not vindicated, just still. There wasn't a dramatic moment, no epiphany, just a calm, steady realization that I was okay, that I didn't owe anyone anything, that I could live a full life without constantly managing someone else's chaos in the background. I thought about her once or twice while I was there, not in a longing way, more like someone flipping through an old yearbook. Familiar, but distant. A past version of me, standing next to a version of her I don't really know anymore. And when I paid the hotel bill at the end of the trip, I used my own card. No split charges, no reimbursement plans. Just my name, my money, my responsibility. It felt clean. Since I got back, I've kept things quiet. I go to work. I come home. I've started therapy again. I've been seeing a financial advisor too, going through everything line by line, cleaning up the pieces of the years I spent stretching myself thin for other people. I'm not perfect. I still have moments where I feel guilty for how things ended between us. But then I remember, she was given chances. Real ones. Conversations. Warnings. Invitations to change. She chose not to take them. And I chose not to carry the weight of that anymore. Sometimes I scroll back through old messages. Not to dwell, just to remind myself how far I've come. The tone of them, the assumptions, the quiet ways I was taught to put her first. It's amazing how easy it is to forget what imbalance looks like when you're standing in the middle of it. But I see it now. I see all of it. She once told me that I was too careful, that I treated relationships like spreadsheets, columns of give and take, numbers to be balanced. I think she meant it as an insult. But maybe that wasn't the worst way to put it. Because eventually, you have to do the math. Eventually, you have to look at what it's costing you to stay in certain roles, and whether the return is worth it. She's not the only one I've had to step back from. There were others, people I thought I had to keep around because of history, or guilt, or convenience. But that's the thing about boundaries. They don't just protect you from others. They help you see yourself clearly too. What you allow, what you normalize, what you've convinced yourself you can live with. I'm not interested in revenge anymore. I'm interested in peace. In not jumping every time the phone rings. In not mentally calculating someone else's budget in case they ask for help. In not apologizing for having limits. If she ever comes back around, really comes back, with accountability, with changed behavior, I'll listen. But she'll have to do the work. Because I've done mine. I don't regret helping her. Not once. Not the money, not the favors, not the support. I know who I was, and I like that version of myself. But I've learned that kindness without boundaries isn't noble. It's unsustainable. And if there's one thing I'll take with me moving forward, it's this. Boundaries don't make you cruel. They make you free. And sometimes, justice doesn't need noise. It doesn't need confrontation or spectacle. Sometimes, it's just a quiet decision. A frozen card. A notarized letter. A name removed from a mortgage. And the silence that follows. Not empty, but clean. No more fixing. No more explaining. Just clarity. And a little peace. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever had to cut ties with someone who took advantage of your kindness, I want to hear about it. What finally pushed you to say enough? Have you ever helped someone financially, only to regret it later? Drop your experience in the comments. And if stories like this help you feel seen, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs a reminder. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary.